Hello, everyone. Welcome to the February 2025 edition of The Stew, the show where we talk about meaningful pieces of media that we've consumed in the past month. Sorry for the bit of delay with this episode, but I did manage to get sick this past month, and that really ruined a lot of timelines I had for the projects that I was working on. But no worries, here I am bringing you all the content that meant a lot to me in this past month. As always, if you'd like to be a part of these conversations, go check out my Patreon, Discord, or just comment down below and let me know what you think. So let's go ahead and get started because I have 5 things I'm going to share with you all today. So the first one I want to share is the movie Flow, now streaming on Max in the US. Flow is a 2024 animated fantasy adventure film featuring no dialogue. It follows a cat, dog, capybara, a ring-tailed lemur in an apparently post-human world, trying to survive as the water level dramatically rises around them. So, going into Flow, I definitely thought this was going to be a great movie. I love animation, and I do think that animation is wildly underlooked because it can bring out some of the most amazing stories in very, very creative ways. This movie, I knew it was going to be really good because there was no dialogue. Oftentimes, when there are no dialogue in a piece of media like this, it allows for so much of your own interpretation. You get to speak and voice your thoughts when it came to the movie. And that was no different. With Flow, it was very much a story of these animals looking for shelter and then finding community with each other by the end of it. I really loved the movie, and it's wonderful to think that this movie was entirely animated in Blender. I think that's just something really cool, especially in today's modern age where we have so many tools that you can really achieve any artistic goal that you set your mind to. But what the movie really meant to me, besides the beautiful animation, was the cast of characters. Seeing the cat be a solitary creature by the beginning of the movie, and then by the end of the movie, it joins together with this group of sort of ragtag individuals who are completely different from one another. I think Flow was a very important movie about migration, in the sense that you have all these people coming from different worlds and different sort of lifestyles and coming together in sort of this melting pot because they're all searching for a better life for them and everyone around them. And you get to see the wonderful nature of when you bring together people from all different diversities and groups together. And the animals, even though they don't speak the same language, they do begin to care for one another and they do begin to help one another. And I loved that messaging in the film. I think that's such a prevalent theme that we are seeing today where people aren't being overlooked because of their diversity. When, in fact, if we look at it, we are all human and we all really want the same things, including safety, love, and care. So I think it's a wonderful film. I would recommend it to everyone. Spoiler alert, but at the end of the film, one of the scenes that really broke my heart was the ending, where they get to see the whale at the very end when the waters had died down. That moment to me was such a poetic moment. I had never really felt sort of that message being told in a story about migration. And one of the reasons is, whereas these characters, the main characters we're following, the cat, the dog, everyone, they're looking for safety in this new world that is filled with water. And once they sort of get that normalcy back, when they figure out that, oh, land is available again and that everything's going to be okay for them, they realize that one person, the whale, is unable to live in this sort of new world. And they were thriving in this other world. And I think that's so interesting to think about because when it comes to a migration story, it's really searching for shelter, searching for a better life for you and those around you and the ones you care about. But to find that this place isn't habitable for you because of the flow of the water, but is habitable for someone else entirely, it really makes you question sort of the dynamics of how we live in society and how we interact with one another and how, one man's trash will be another man's treasure. And I think that's a really cool aspect about the movie. And that scene was super touching and awfully sad. So I really, really appreciate the movie. I love the movie. If you wanted to check out that movie, I highly recommend that movie. I am glad my wife and I, we got to watch it in theaters. So they were doing a private showing for this movie. And it was great because we did not have our dog around with us at home. And there was a lot of dogs barking. And I know little Coffee over here would have barked tremendously at the TV because he does not like other dogs. Anyway, the next thing I want to talk to you all about today is the video game Crow Country. Now, Crow Country is a 2024 survival horror game developed and published by SFB Games. The story follows: the year is 1990, and you play as Mara Forrest, a special agent investigating Crow Country, an abandoned rural amusement park near Atlanta, Georgia, shut down 2 years prior by its founder, Edward Crow, who also mysteriously disappeared. Now, I have heard a lot of good praise about Crow Country. It plays very similar to the old-timey Silent Hill 1s and Resident Evil 1 video games, and I really appreciated that. I love the art style. I think it was very reminiscent of those times, and it was really fun to have sort of a comic-y environment of an amusement park with those sort of chunky, blocky graphics, and I think it worked really well. I will say, though, from a gameplay standpoint, the controls were a bit clunky. Not to a fault. It is definitely manageable and definitely playable, but it was a little bit clunky to aim and shoot the creatures. Though I did find myself not really engaging with a lot of the combat mechanics, because to me the game was less survival horror and way more puzzle aspect, which I actually preferred because the puzzles were interesting enough to solve and it was not overly complicated. Many of the puzzles were just solved by just going to one location, finding the hint, and then going back and solving the puzzle. I did appreciate the writing and the humor of the game. I think Mara Forrest played as a very fun protagonist, and oftentimes very witty and very funny, especially in this awful sort of post-apocalyptic amusement park. I think overall it was a very fun game, an exciting game to play, especially explore the fun little areas of the amusement parks. And I do think that the creatures were actually genuinely terrifying. There were some creatures where I didn't want anything to do with them. But what really meant to me about the game, and one of the reasons why I loved it so much, and considering talking about it in a future video essay, so stay tuned, is the fact that, spoilers, the ending of the game really dealt with something that is so critical in today's age when it comes to global warming and climate change. I think seeing the greed of the main character, Edward Crow, and his father, frankly, essentially, they were harvesting this portal's tentacles and other things like that. They were harvesting the gold out of it for riches. But it turns out that that gold was supplying a teleporter for people in the future when the future has been ruined by a devastating climate and overall inhabitable Earth. They were trying to retreat back to this time. But because they were so greedy and they were cutting the wires and stealing all the gold, the humans from that time were coming back and they were being infected in the process and mutated and all that stuff. And the big plot twist that Mara Forrest was the child that was endangered by the first person teleporting back by a bacteria that was from the future and not from our time. I think that was really cool. I do think that it shows so much about the nature of our world and of greed, which I do want to talk about in a future video essay. So again, stay tuned. That's still being worked on. I really liked that aspect of the game, and I think that really sold it to me from being a fun little puzzle adventure game to a really meaningful work of art that I could really extrapolate a lot of deeper conversations and deeper thoughts. Overall, I would highly recommend it, especially if you're a fan of puzzles and you are sort of light on the survival horror. They do have an aspect where you can actually just play the entire game with no enemies and just have it entirely puzzle-based and exploration. And I think that's actually a really fun way to play the game. I don't think that's a boring way to play it at all. I really love the environments. Again, it was very fun to see all these locations. So I would definitely recommend it to anyone and hope you give it a try. The next thing I want to talk about is Creature Commandos, the first animated show of the DC New Universe spearheaded by James Gunn. Creature Commandos premiered in 2024 on Max. It follows the assembled Black Ops team of monsters led by General Rick Flag Sr., all assembled by Amanda Waller. So, personally, I am very fatigued by the superhero genre. I probably will not go out of my way to watch many superhero things unless they're good. One thing that came out was Captain America recently, and I have not watched that one. It is still on my to-watch list, but it's a casual list. I'm not super excited for it as I was back when Avengers Endgame was coming out. So I think we're all feeling that fatigue about superheroes. And to be honest, I didn't really want to watch Creature Commandos. I was not super excited for it. And to be honest, just right off the bat, it was a good show. I don't think it was bad. I don't think it was not worth your time. I think the animation was gorgeous. They did a great job with the characters. I loved several aspects of each character. And I think the writing for the show was superb. One thing that I will notice, and what really means a lot to me, is the emphasis that James Gunn, who also wrote Peacemaker, emphasizes trauma. I think all the characters in Creature Commando, as well as in Peacemaker, had several forms of trauma, which really made them more round in terms of characters. Seeing every single character have a traumatic backstory is actually really humanizing when you think about them as the monsters or the monster team or the Creature Commandos. It feels like every single one of them had this awful thing happen to them that made me empathize with them deeply. Though their lives may have been, an unfortunate turn of events, there were moments where, life just wasn't fair to them. And I think that made me care about the characters a lot more. I do think because James Gunn incorporates all that sort of suffering and trauma that each character faces, it does elevate the show and you get to really understand the characters. And I think that's the most meaningful part about the show to me, because even though I am fatigued about superheroes and the superhero genre, I am not fatigued about people. I think the stories and everything that we do and how we portray ourselves and the grief and love and everything we feel isn't something I would never get tired of. But I will get tired of men in tights. So I don't know how Superman's going to go, but I will talk about that because I am generally excited for it after seeing both Peacemaker and Creature Commandos. And I trust that James Gunn is going to do a good job, but will it be a great job? We'll find out. So I'll let you know when that time comes. The next thing I want to talk to you all about today is a book published in 2007 by Seth Godin called The Dip, a little book that teaches you when to quit and when to stick. So I read this book and it was a very short book. I don't think it was that long of a book. I finished it in a few sittings, and overall, I have to say, as weird as it sounds, it is a self-help book that feels very boomer. It definitely feels like it was from a generation where they really emphasize, picking yourself up from your bootstraps. Not to say it's a bad book. I do think that the overall messaging of the book says, if you reach a dip, which is sort of like at a point where you feel unmotivated to keep going, like for example, when you start a new project, it's all exciting and you're having fun. You're like, oh, this is brand new. And then all of a sudden you dip because it's sort of more of the same and all this stuff. And it's in those dips where you're feeling unenthusiastic and just bored, or that it's hard even, that you just don't know if you're going to be able to push through this dip. The book tells you either quit it or keep at it. And the primary reasoning for it to say keep going is asking you the question, do you want to be the best at it? Like if you are a artist or a writer or a mathematician, at a certain point you have to ask yourself, do you want to be the best? Do you want to be the best artist, best writer, best mathematician? And if you don't want to be the best, you should probably quit and do something else that you want to be the best at. Because as he says in the book, people go to a town and they're like, I want to try a restaurant, but I want to try the best restaurants available. Let's find the best. And though I think that mentality is inherently good, I think we should all strive to be the best that we can be. I do think it is rooted in a bit of a fantasy when it comes to many people because, being the best at something is not really going to be the best at everyone's preference. Like, for example, if you wanted to be the best writer of nonfiction, people who read fiction are not going to say, I want to read the best nonfiction, And I think because of that sort of nuance that is not really conveyed in the book, I think it's really dehumanizing in a way because it takes so many people and sort of dehumanizes them to what they're the best at, where it's usually job related or task focused or something that's, extrinsic in value, but it doesn't really emphasize the idea of being the best person that you can be. And I think we should all just strive to be the best and learn to quit not only when we're not enthusiastic about sticking with it for the long run, but quit in a way that won't be productive to you or to your self-growth. Because there are many things that you can do besides just sticking to be the best restaurant or the best whatever that really can enhance, your quality of life. So I think there's a lot of things you can do. And the book, again, it feels a little bit fantastic because it treats it very simply in the idea that, hey, you should just quit if you don't want to be the best at this. When in reality, we have a lot on our plates, especially now compared to when this book was written in 2007 and the mentality of some older generations. There's a lot of suffering and there's a lot of grief and struggle, and capitalism is just awful. So at a certain point, quitting may not be viable for many people in certain circumstances. And to be able to quit is often a luxury. So I think that it vastly undermines what a lot of people are going through, but the overall messaging of the book is a positive one. And I just want all of you to try to be the best people that you can be, no matter the circumstances. All right. And the last movie that I want to talk to you all about today is the 2024 film, Your Monster, which is also streaming on Max. Surprisingly, I watched a lot of Max this month. The basic premise is Laura Franco is a young actress enduring a cancer diagnosis, and she tries to cope with being dumped by her playwright boyfriend, Jacob, who she helped write a play with him prior to their split. During her recovery, she does recognize a noise and discovers a monster in the house, living in the closet upstairs. And though she's initially frightened, she begins to bond with the monster. So, this movie was directed by Carolyn Lindy. And let me just tell you, Carolyn, this movie was a great movie. I have not stopped thinking about this movie ever since I watched it because of several reasons that I'll tell you right now. I do think that the interactions between Laura and the monster are a little bit campy. It's a little bit silly and a little bit funny, and it definitely feels, again, because Jacob, her ex-boyfriend, was writing a play, it doesn't really feel like a theater production, very into the arts and very artsy people who are into acting. So because of that, I think it can get a little goofy at times because, again, the overall premise and the monster, which was trying to be horrific at one point, feels very much like a drama kid because he loves theater and he loves, singing and writing and everything else like that. But despite the sort of silliness and campiness of the movie, it told such a wonderful story and such a good premise of a movie that I would measure akin to something like Black Swan, because both those movies had a very similar feel. Whereas Black Swan was serious in tone, Your Monster was more comedic in tone. But overall, they felt the exact same in the message that they were trying to portray. And so, spoilers, it turns out that the monster isn't actually real. And it's just a manifestation that Laura has when she's more or less sticking up for herself. And I can really describe it in terms of my favorite scene of the movie, which by far, I loved this scene so much. This is the scene that I think about constantly ever since I finished the movie. Carolyn Lindy, you did a great job. And the acting for this scene was incredible. But this scene, when you find out that Jacob, who essentially used Laura for the play, was essentially leaving her when she had her diagnosis and saying awful things. And it turns out by the end of the movie, he was also hooking up with Laura's best friend. Well, essentially, Jacob was an awful guy. But there's a scene that I love where the monster is trying to get Laura to sort of let out her monster by telling her that the way that she portrays herself is too polite and she's too forgiving of Jacob for what he did. And ultimately, the message that he's trying to convey is that it's okay to admit that that wasn't okay, that it wasn't fair to you, that his behaviors are not justifiable and they are not good. His behaviors were awful. And it's okay to not be okay about it. And I love that messaging of the scene because, to be honest, the world right now doesn't feel okay. And I know that there's so many people who are just chugging along and they are working through it and they are just saying, it is what it is. And certain people's behavior has been awful. And I really appreciate that scene because, especially for women, they don't feel like they can speak up about many of these issues because, to be honest, the misogyny of our world is prevalent, and I believe in everyone having a voice and being able to speak up about it. And even as a son of immigrants, it feels like I don't really have a say compared to a lot of people around me. So to say that this is not okay. Your behavior is not okay. Your actions are not okay. The world right now is not okay. Everything just needs to be able to be called out for what it is, and what it is crazy and awful. And because of that, that scene really spoke with me. And to be honest, the ending of the movie where Jacob is murdered by Laura under the guise of the monster that she let out, even though she gave a stunning performance and beautiful song at the end, I think it's a little unsatisfying to me. I wanted him to essentially atone for all of this, and I do think that the movie got to a point where violence became the answer. Again, no detriment to the movie. I think it was a wonderful story, wonderful production of just that pure rage that we feel, that monster we want to let out. And I really appreciate the movie. I really love the messaging, and I really loved the overall production and everything about the film. It was one that's going to stick with me a while, again, because of that scene, especially in the state of the world. So, great movie. I would highly recommend it if you want to watch it. Again, it is a little campy, it is a little fun, it is a little goofy, but it meant a tremendous amount to me. So, there you have it, everyone. That is going to be this month of the stew. I hope you all had a wonderful February and a wonderful time watching this. Let me know what you think about all the pieces of media that I covered. And if you have any recommendations, please go ahead and let me know. I'm always on the lookout for more shows, movies, games, etc. So, with that, I hope you're all doing well. I hope you all have a wonderful March. I will see you all next month. See ya. Thank you all for watching.